In this presentation, Sara Vaughan, the Senior Director at Microsoft Australia, explores the fundamental principles that underpin the ability of market-leading companies to adapt to industry changes and grow in the face of technological and digital disruption. She makes a compelling case for focusing on three areas that drive innovation: technology, organization, and culture.
I'm going to presume that you're here today because you understand why it's important to innovate. I'm not going to build the case for innovation. Rather, I want to talk about some key drivers and in particular give you some context around what's happening from a technological perspective, organizational shifts that are, whether we like it or not, are forcing us to change the way we do work. And I can give you a taste of why we should embrace it and get excited by it and look forward to the future of the new world of work. And then finally, I want to talk about culture. And if you don't mind, I'll talk to you a little bit about research from Australia, but also some things that I've seen in startups and big organizations that help and hinder driving innovation in your workplace. So technology. These are the themes that are driving incredible change in pretty much every single industry that exists today, as well as creating new market entries, changing the way we work, changing the way our lives, and also just decreasing the time it takes for that S-curve that S-curve to be truncated in a way that these things become mainstream. Now, big data and machine learning, probably, we think about 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, the ability to play with a data set would be only in the realm of those who had huge high computing capability or lots of time probably in universities. But now with the availability of technological platforms like Amazon and Azure and other open source capabilities, but be able to understand and interpret those data sets, being able to make predictive models based on those data sets are now in the realm of a student who sits at home and wants to play around at no cost apart from their own time and their own IP to play with that. There is probably the biggest challenge that we will face is the fact that there's going to be 40 zettabytes of data that exists for us to try and make meaning of by 2020. 1 zettabyte is the equivalent of reading 127 newspapers from front to end per day per person in the world. So you imagine 44 zettabytes, and how do we actually make meaning of that? Thank goodness for machine learning to actually help us interpret that. So one of the things that excites me is around the capability, like I said, that can be just one person with an idea, with access to huge computing power to change the world or change the way we do things. A good example is a startup in Australia called HyperAnna. They began in February of 2016. They have, the time till now, they have received around $16 million in venture capital, and they have all the big banks and financial institutions in Australia. It was a statistician and a computer scientist who decided that they could automate data science. So you think about one new profession in our industry, in the world, data scientists. So who talked about a data scientist 3 years ago? So suddenly we're training data scientists, we're hiring them, we need them, then they're these data magicians who can make meaning of this 44 zettabytes of data. Well, here is a startup who started in February 2016 and has automated what a data scientist can do. So you imagine sending an email to Anna and asking for the most likely outcome of your business sales for product X after Christmas. And in 3 seconds, you get an email back from Anna. Anna's amazing. Anna is a machine. And they basically pitted HyperAnna, against human data scientists, and they're changing the way algorithms are done. So again, that's how quickly things are happening. Blending physical and digital worlds. So what it is to be human is going to be challenged. There's some research coming out of Queensland University of Technology, which is, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biotechnologist, but they're looking at paralysis and how they can bypass the neural pathways to enable people to have movement in their limbs again after being paralyzed by basically machines inside of humans. And so that's something quite extreme, but if we think about how technology is going to enhance our world, it could be mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality in healthcare, in teaching, in school. This is something that's very real and near. And then finally, natural interaction. And as a technologist, this is the one that is, to me, very exciting. because it's about democratizing technology. It's about, rather than having to learn and talking about the diminishing benefits of going from a PC to a Mac, imagine if technology is so natural that you don't even notice that it's there serving you. And that is a promise of, and the work that a whole lot of technology companies are trying to do at the moment, where we're looking at how do you make technology support our way of life and our work versus something you have to go to in order to do a task, and you have to learn about that to do a task. So in that scenario, what we had was a corporate biotech firm who was looking for freelance project workers. It was about a global workforce that could go anywhere at any time and get the information they needed to do their job and interact and collaborate. But not only that, the work that they were doing was being shared back into a classroom where the school children were interacting in such a rich, intuitive way. Now, if my children went to that school, I would have a hard time getting them to leave, come home at the end of the day. But in the richness of that learning experience would be just something beyond what they are experiencing today. I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the things that you may have seen, but some of the underlying technology there. High empathy present. So Microsoft and a whole lot of other firms are working on, in our research labs, of how do you bring remote workers together in a way that is close to, as possible, face-to-face in real life. And so it's not just about the things you say, it's your body language, it's your emotions, it's the sense that you really would only have if you had normally face-to-face. So in this context, we have a whole lot of intelligence services that are available for anyone to use, that you can embed technology into software that can read a face and say age, gender, and emotions. And then how do you actually display that? And in the bottom example here, you had a lady who was talking to her father and asking questions about how his knee surgery had been going. And in this sense, the wall turned into a video. He showed the level of movement in his leg, and she could see data on that about how much it had improved since the last time she saw it. Of course, from his perspective, he may be using that technology to ensure that the movement and his exercises were appropriate for the injury that he had to aid in his recovery. But if you think about one thing that's really common in Australia at the moment is parents who live overseas or parents who live remotely. For me, I have a 9-month-old son, but I also have parents who are going into retirement. So the ability of me to look after my family, if anything was to happen to them, and they live 300 kilometres away, is going to be a very big challenge for me to stay working, to stay close to my children's school, but be there for my family. Smart personal assistant. So I love this. I am living off my watch. So mapping in Hong Kong, I can just quickly find where I am and gives me, turn-by-turn directions. But imagine if you had this kind of level of diary and information to you, that instead of having to look, and it's still quite cumbersome, information is starting to be presented to you in a way that's useful. You can use human gestures to change it. And then, of course, what she did is she went into a co-working space and was able to pass her identity and walk in at night time when there was no one there to actually check who she was. And then, of course, it also enabled a workspace to come to life. So the information that she needed to have access to was available to her. No briefcase, no laptop, there it was. And Samsung are currently working on flexible screens. There's a university professor at QUT who's built solar panels into clothes. So as you walk, you'll be able to charge your devices. And the other thing is this in fashion. So more and more in design and 3D printing is around fashion that can represent your mood and change based on where you are. Daytime to nighttime outfits suddenly become very simple based on the technology and where it will go. Holograms in my world. So holograms are probably one of the most interesting things I think in regards to learning about the world around us in an environment where today we could turn this room into a classroom for Boeing, who wanted to teach its engineers about Boeing engines. And it's incredibly expensive to take offline to teach a group of engineers how to do it. But imagine a hologram suddenly in this room, and we're all looking at it together. We're watching fuel flow. We're watching what happens to an engine when the temperature changes. I saw this on stage at a Microsoft event 2 years ago. It was ridiculously cool. But again, it's about the imagination, how we can bring these things to life. In this context, we had a number of different ways of capturing information and adding information in the real world. So you had a scuba diver who was looking through some lenses, and information that had been captured in the past was being transposed on the real world to enhance the exploration. You had a lady who was pulled up a 3D diagram to look at it from a design and from a blueprint for a building. And then, of course, you saw it in the classroom. At the moment, that kind of thing is quite expensive, but the rapid rate of adoption and invention and inspiration means that it's going to become something that I think in 10 years we'll just become used to. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the other thing that's really enabling innovation. Again, I talked about big data, machine learning, but it's the digital platforms that enable companies and organizations and teams to build something and quickly get it out to market that has really driven a lot of the disruption in business processes. The digital ecosystems are probably the thing that's been the most disruptive thing to industry. There's three types. This scale. When you think about a scale digital ecosystem, it's about getting a service to its customers in an efficient way. So a good example of that is Airbnb or Uber. So things that have existed in the past, but now it's the efficiencies are in how you map people who can provide a service and those who want to consume the service. Another one is systemic, and this is an interesting one I think that will become quite normal in how we do things as institutions and organizations. A good example, and I'll use the Microsoft one, is we have an Azure platform. So we are the intermediary in that case. And we have opened our data sets, our APIs, a lot of the software research that we have done to the market for others to build on and innovate in themselves. And you've created an ecosystem based on that technology that interacts with other ecosystems. And then finally, creative. Imagine you want an admin assistant, or you want someone to book your diary for you. Basically, these platforms give you access to thousands and thousands of professionals around the world, and you can outsource work that you needed to be done via these platforms. Those are the ones that exist in Australia. 99 Designs is for, you can get a logo, a brand, a website, a PR pitch in the space of 3 days. And what you have is a whole lot of creative people who are pitching for the work, who are completely freelance workers. And that one in particular is driving, I think, the gig economy, which is a supporter of the gig economy where people work based on projects, not based on the organizations that they work for. Those digital platforms are enabling that style of work. Now, all of these basically remove a lot of the barriers to entry for new players. They challenge the status quo on what capability and expertise costs. If you think about launching a product and launching it quickly, a digital ecosystem platform is the thing that enables this kind of work, and what a lot of startups are using today. So the cost of getting your first customer, it's all in the IP, of course, and building the capability, but marketing and sales, in particular as traditional modes of taking a new product to market, are absolutely being challenged because you can become global at your day one of market exposure. Business model shifts. So this is one that I think is challenging a lot of the incumbency of institutions like mine and like others that have been around for a long time. Customer-led product design. Fancy letting the customer in to your product design process. Well, one of the two types of design thinking. So design thinking as a methodology is all about involving the people who will take advantage of your product or service at the very beginning of the ideation stage and testing and prototyping. Another one is outcome-based pricing. So think about insurance rather than paying for an insurance based on anything possibly happening, based on a slim set of data points around your age, your occupation, your current health. But how could you minimize your actual health insurance based on the likely outcome of that service? Customers as partners, again, if I think about it from a Microsoft perspective, we have had a very traditional way to market, even for a software company, which was you had your distribution, you had your systems integrators, and you had your customers. And what we're seeing now is we have partners who are becoming customers, so they're taking advantage of our technology. They're also partners because then they're building their own IP and they're selling it, therefore driving our platform further. The whole lines between complete distinctions of who's a partner and who's a customer are being challenged. App stores and marketplaces, again, in the context of taking new products to market. I think in Australia, there was an example, we used to have around 80,000 professional developers. They earned their money by building code. Then Apple released its App Store, And suddenly we had 800,000 people who described themselves as a coder because they were building apps, they were putting in the marketplace, and they saw it as an entire new way to make income and have a livelihood. The other thing around this is around things like Kickstarter as a way to test whether your product or your service actually has the market's interested in it. You basically put up a proposition to Kickstarter, and then you say, I need this much money raised, and people contribute to you getting that product online. Now, of course, if you get nothing, it means the product probably doesn't have desirability. But if you get a lot and you exceed your expectations, you're onto something. So a fantastic way, again, to test a product and a service. Open data stores is one of the things that's quite full of conflict around the discussion with that. If I have the data, it's my IP, what will I do with it? Whereas what we're seeing is the market challenge us to think differently about that, whether it's health data, whether it's definitely not customer and privacy data, but if it's things that you can abstract privacy information from and share with the market, who knows what we can find of it, and who knows what kind of product someone can build as a result of that. So major business model shifts around pricing. We went from a licensing company to a subscription and consumption company. If you use a Microsoft service today, if it's a enterprise type of service to run your business, you could turn off that contract with Microsoft in a day. Whereas before, 5 years ago, it was a 3-year contract. And again, so the reason and need to be valuable to your customers, to not just be valuable at the time that you're making a decision about a contract, but actually be valuable for a full lifetime, every day, every minute, providing value, is ever present. Now that is frightening, because thinking about your customer every minute of the day is challenging. But it's important, because I would like for someone providing me a service, when I'm using that service, to be very, very conscientious around, am I getting value from it? And we are definitely moving to a value-based world, where the consumer will choose on a daily basis whether or not they'll stay with you. So now I want to talk a little bit about organization. So automation. This is some data from a McKinsey report. They just released a new one. This talks about a little bit about, if you look at all the jobs that exist today, how much of the work that we all do every day could be automated. And these are, I think the stat that they use is that 65% of all jobs could have half of them or 45% of them automated. Now, if you look up here, 81% predictable physical activities. So that is from a machine and manufacturing perspective. That is probably an area from an efficiency perspective that we've been looking at for a long time. But processing data, and I talked about data scientists and that startup, 69%. Now, as an example of a company, we have over 100,000 employees at Microsoft. Probably 8% of them are doing data analysis, forecasting, whether it's in the field all the way up to corporate headquarters. We also have our CFO runs machine learning over our data at the same time and does a gap analysis between what the people say is their most likely revenue structure and what the machines say. And it's interesting how quickly we're being able to automate a whole lot of work because of the smarts that exist there. But there is an automation dilemma, which is heartening to us, which is that as soon as we automate something, we realize that there's something new and a new problem that we want to solve. We live in a world where there are so many opportunities and problems for us to apply our expertise and intellect to, that automation is challenging if you are an organization that wants to sit and stay and cruise, for want of a better term. Whereas automation also provides liberation to some degree to focus on things that are and could be very, very meaningful. And to also think about what is it in an organization that only people can do? What is uniquely human that a machine can't automate? Creativity, collaboration, empathy, all these sorts of things, a certain type of analysis that is powerful in the context of building, innovating, and being resilient to market change. The new world of work. So organizations are changing, and there are a number of drivers to this. A big one is the number of millennials that are coming into the workforce. Millennials are now likely to be mid-level managers, particularly in a context, grown up with technology, grown up with an expectation of information in your pocket whenever you want it. The instant satisfaction that technology can provide. And so working in an organization that's incredibly hierarchical, where information travels up a chain of command and then down again, in a world where we're used to social media and social tools, is being absolutely challenged. Why can't I do it this way? Why can't I have access to that information? Who wrote that piece of knowledge and content that I want to get access to? So what we're seeing is that as technology is driving it, but also the expectations and wanting to hire the best people and what they expect to have as tools when they come to work is driving some of these changes in the organization. So think about flat text. You know, if you're digital, it was about sending an email, to now rich multi-sense interactions. So that example of going from reading in a textbook about a Boeing engine to suddenly seeing this hologram in the room where you see fuel flow and changes to it, that is where we're going, and that will change the expectations and how and what you hire for. Personal assistance to social intelligence. So we're not there really yet. If you think about personal assistance, that is a Cortana or a Siri helping you day to day. You know, it's going to take you 20 minutes to get to the next meeting location. If you want to get to the airport, you need to leave now. Those things are really useful, and they are based on some context and some diary and some access to diary and some capability. But imagine a world where you have given permission to a digital assistant to assist you in whatever way it sees fit. So talked about the importance of a holiday in allowing for creative time. What if your assistant, your digital assistant said, it's time to book a holiday. I've looked in your diary and in your bank account, and I think we can get you to Honolulu for 7 days, and there's a great deal. Book it now. Do you want me to book it now? And everybody in your family is free, and you're going to miss that family appointment you didn't want to go to anyway. Cool, right? But that requires trust. That requires the technology and the data that's collecting to be secure, and for you to feel comfortable with that. But I am looking forward to that world, because then I'm going to read books, I'm going to do other things with my time, rather than get on TripAdvisor and all those places to try and find the best deal and have lots of discussions with my husband. That's the future. Starting with a blank slate. So in my team at Microsoft, for years we used to get whacked around by corporate headquarters saying, you always want to invent it yourself. You always want to start from scratch. And that is absolutely a cultural thing about Australia and about the Microsoft teams that I worked in, which is I think we can do it better. The world has to change because of the pace of disruption and capability and competitors. And we're moving from starting with a blank slate to leveraging open source and recipes. So let's build on the shoulders of giants. Let's take the knowledge and the abilities from all these places and recombinant innovation. Let's think about it in a different way, and the time that we gain by doing it like that versus thinking we can do it better from starting from scratch. And of course, that it needs the world to be far more open in order to do that, and available to know where do I find these sources and recipes that I can build on. Mass market demand and supply. We're moving to a world where you have networks based on like interests, like minds, solving problems together, and the collaboration between those. Which means, again, from taking a product to market, you potentially have an ecosystem that already exists for you of people who are most likely to be able to contribute and use your product. And then the last one, which I think is probably the biggest challenges for organizations today, which is moving from fixed teams, so that hierarchical structure, where you'll work for one organization or one faculty or one group for 5, 10, who knows how many years, to actually being moved based on a project basis. So think the Hollywood movie style, where you work on a movie for a while, then you take your expertise and your interests and you go and work on the next movie. Imagine that in your organization. That will challenge reward systems, tenure, experience, how we think about experience, and how we think about building that experience, both as leaders in an organization as well as the individual, what project to choose to get the most experience. So this is a report that was referenced in Harvard Business Review in March this year. It talks about the expectation of leaders in their industry being disrupted by digital and the new technology. Here you'll see, dominated by B2C organizations, those that are going to be most disrupted are those with low barriers to entry, large legacy business models, i.e. to try and adapt to the market and where it wants to go. You're so embedded in the way that you have always done it that you cannot move quickly. And then inflexible organization and cultural inertia, cruising pretending the innovation isn't happening, not paying attention to new market entrants and startups, and just hoping that things don't change and you can continue with the business as it always has been. And this can be at a leadership level or at a grassroots level. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about culture, actually a lot about culture, and how it is the thing that's probably going to be the most challenging and the most important in the context of responding to innovation and being an innovative organisation. Okay, so I want to share with you a little bit about some research that we conducted in the fiscal year 15 and 16 in Australia. So Australia is actually dominated by small and medium enterprises. There's 1.4 million small and medium enterprises in Australia, and the churn is around 50% a year. So 50% go out of business and 50% go into business. So it's a super dynamic, very competitive and challenging area, and yet it's the fundamental backbone of the economy in Australia. What we wanted to look at were what was the difference between organisations that persisted, were resilient, and were considered to be innovative in their field and their industry, and what were the fundamental things in their culture and their way of doing work that you could attribute to being more innovative and driving growth. And we also looked at those as a factor that were growing faster in business for longer and growing faster than their industry peers. So basically we segmented them into three groups. So leader is 33%, cruiser 43%, and laggards 24%. So it is a very broad definition, but it gave us a way of actually looking at the things that were different about each of these organisations. Just as a summary view was how when those organisations that were segmented as leaders, what was their growth versus their industry peers versus a cruiser and a laggard. And I think the terms are self-explanatory. A leader is leading. A cruiser is doing okay, not too challenged yet, but if they don't do something. And a laggard was already falling behind in the context of how they were running their business, what they were taking to market, and adapting. So 39% of leaders were growing revenue faster than industry peers. And then cruisers and laggards kind of sat in the middle with only 24% and 23% of them actually growing faster. 39% is quite a positive number, and fortuitous considering that they were innovative leaders. So proving innovation is key. Now, what we wanted to do is not look at their product or service, but look at how they ran their business and what were the attributes of driving an innovation culture. So consistently, you can see that the leaders do more of these things than the cruisers and the laggards. So communicating with customers. Back to my business model, which is the customer influences your product and your service design. They're involved in how you run your business. You get feedback from them. Developing new products or services. So this was consistently not resting on your laurels. What do we need to do to maintain momentum in the marketplace? Contacting international partners and stakeholders. And this is again around that collaboration and building on the success of others in order to innovate faster. Creating platforms to share business ideas internally. So I think how an organisation talks between employees, staff, and leaders was absolutely clear in all these leader categories, which was not only is it important to communicate, to share, to collaborate on ideas, you had to create a platform to make this easy for your employees. In the case of Australia, where it's an 8-hour flight from Sydney to Perth, you can't go to another city without making it a commitment of an overnight or a day. Collaborating remotely is really important. Communicating between staff members, and that's peer-to-peer in other groups, breaking down those silos, enabling more flexible conditions for staff. So at Microsoft about 6 years ago, we moved from one desk per person to one desk to 2 people. And so no one had a desk anymore. Teams kind of had areas and neighbourhoods in which to work. The immediate reaction of staff was revolt. Where am I going to put my photos? Where am I going to put my trophies? How are people going to find me? And we have presence, we have Skype, we had tools to actually show you where somebody was in the building and whether they were available or not available. So there was a bit of a radical protest, and yet we kept going. And then we moved to 1 to 3, so 3 people to 1 desk. No one noticed. Then we got rid of a floor. And now we have 1 desk to 6 people. We've got 100 desks at a co-working space. And the line that I remember so clearly was, it's not where you do your work, it's what you do and achieve. So the 9 to 5, gone. It was all based on outcomes and ensuring communication. So I could say to my team, the most important thing for you to achieve this month is X, Y, Z. This is our culture, these are our values. Do this within the realm of those. Let me know when you need me, go. And then if I see you, I see you. If I don't, I don't. Radical. Amazing. As a recruitment strategy, as a retention strategy, and in regards to the business, fantastic. Drivers of innovation culture. So leadership values are critical. So when the leaders say, we are an innovation culture, we want you to learn and risk, fail as often as you like, as long as we learn something for it, go, and then comes to you the next day and says, how's your numbers? How many papers have you published? You know, how many times has it been picked up? And why aren't you doing more of that? But hang on, you just said to me that we're risk and learning and we should be innovative and that requires lots of different kind of work. Just go home and say, no, we're an efficiency organisation. Because if the leader's intrinsic value isn't, we want new knowledge, we want to learn, we want to be resilient, and we've got the stamina to see it through, it's all over. Employee engagement. Again, so contrary to that, in a way, is it's not all about the leader's voice and the leader's value. I'm going to tell you that we're innovative, and I've just changed the job title to innovation leaders. Yay! Employees and your customers and your partners are probably the most insightful in regards to where are the opportunities for innovation and where are the challenges. And understanding that sentiment and that knowledge and bringing into how do we build a more innovative culture is very critical. Recognition symbols. If you recognize revenue, deals, market share, but you don't recognize learning and risks and space and creativity, then again, you won't. And some of the things are really simple. You could say, one of the things that we changed our recognition and our rewards was to look at 3 things. So how did you contribute? What did you do to drive the business, whatever the business is? How did you contribute to others' success? And what did you learn? The first year we applied this across our employee base, it was all about number 1. What did you contribute? And then slowly over a couple of years it became, well, what did you learn and how did you contribute to others' success? And that became a thing that our leaders actually assessed and gave constructive feedback on. And it became a true driver to being more innovative and being more thoughtful about not, a team versus an individual success. Diversity inclusion. If you ask your employees and your staff to share opportunities for ideas, but you say that's a stupid idea. No, don't get it. I can't listen, I haven't got time to listen because I've got to go drive revenue. You will, again, undermine the culture of innovation. Embracing diversity is an exciting thing. Imagine if all your differences, all the things that made you the same, but all the things that make you different, quirky, your interests, your passions, were able to be let loose in the workplace. How different the world could be. If we could all listen to each other with respect and curiosity, what we might learn. And I think that's probably, diversity inclusion is one of the most challenging things to embrace because symmetry versus asymmetry. We hire people like ourselves. We like people like ourselves. But we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with different ideas and different perspectives from people in our teams. But diversity with purpose, not just, hey, we'll just be all diverse. Actually thinking about how can diversity be a true strength. Risk-taking to learn and grow. It is such a hard thing to take risks. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some major big, hairy goals and the reality of what it took to get there. But you have to carve off space in the organisation to allow for learning and risk-taking in particular. Because if you fail once and then it's not acceptable, you're not going to put yourself in a place to fail twice. And yet, great change comes with months, if not years, of failure. But I think the difference there is not seeing the failure as that word is laden with meaning. But if we think about it, what do we learn? Those failures were amazing because we learned what to do, what not to do. And as a result, our knowledge, we have new knowledge, regardless of whether we've been able to commercialize it or not. And then finally, purpose-driven strategy. The other thing that we found in the research that we've done, as well as more industry around the world, is that when you have a purpose, when the organization is united behind something big and important that everyone can make meaning of it, and it relates to them in some way, and that they'll give their discretionary time to it because it's important, then innovation starts to happen. Because when you care about something, really, really care about it, you'll move heaven and earth to make it happen. And if you have a leadership culture that reminds people that that's our purpose every day, then you'll see different things happen. Everybody on the planet realizing their potential. So when you think about making choices and which markets to go into, you have this thing in the back of the mind of, is this inclusive? Is this going to have an impact? Is this helping our customers do something meaningful and special? And then you get different kinds of rewards from that work. Now, I'm just going to give you 3 examples. So Thomas Edison, everyone knows about the light bulb, and the number of patents and work that was done before Thomas Edison put his patent for the light bulb. Now, as far as I know from the research, he didn't go out of his way to say, I'm going to make a light bulb. I'm going to spend days and days and days and days and days, years and years and years on the light bulb. The purpose was, how do I bring light to cities in an efficient way? Because of course there was lots of research which had, I think oil exploded, had a tendency to burn houses down. And so if you think about this undertaking, thousands of experiments to create a non-combustible filament. They experimented with 6,000 types of plant material, and every experiment they did had to be different. So for me, I'd be like, cool, now I've got to think of something else crazy to try and add into this. But it took so much to get to the point which then has changed the world in such a incredible way, of course. But it wasn't let's do 10 experiments, and if it doesn't work, we'll consider it a failure and move on to the next big problem. It was a significant undertaking. And I think that point around stamina, and it's hard to be innovative, you have to start knowing that it's going to take a lot of work and you need resilience. But there'll be a payoff. Let there be light. The Human Genome Project. So some of the numbers are debatable, but overall I think the US government put $14.5 billion in 2 lots into this. And it was a big, hairy, bold undertaking is how can we map the human genome? There were lots of collaboration by different industries to, again, work on this thing. They came in 2 years under the expected timeline and under budget in that. Discovery of 1,800 disease genes, 2,000 new genetic tests for the human condition. Think about personalized medicine. There are so many artifacts that have come from this particular piece of research, and this is a big one. Like, I'm not suggesting that we all undertake something like this, but I think stories like this are great for your mindset around, if we get there, it's not just getting there, it's all the things that will come from that. Tasmanian tiger, anyone know about the Tasmanian tiger? It's extinct. They just mapped the DNA, they've got the DNA. They've now worked out that it was a marsupial, almost like a wolf. Now, think about all the things that are extinct in our world. If this hadn't been undertaken, would we be able to have this new knowledge about the world around us? And in that case, a terrible, sad, extinct animal. Now I want to bring it a little bit closer to our lives. One of the things that Microsoft does is have a week where it's called 1 Week, and teams from around the world, some of them go to Seattle, some of them do it in their location, and they basically compete in a giant hackathon. Everyone's got expertise they use day-to-day to drive our business forward and support our customers. But this is a week where it's a passion project, and you have to recruit teams to come work with you. It'll be made up of coders, of business people, marketers, operations people to do something that's important to them. So I just want to finish with a checklist of things to approach and take. So evolving the organisation and culture, really important to build the case for change. We think about organisation inertia. It can be because we're blinded or when we've got goggles on and we're not seeing what's going on around us. But the case for change is really critical. Assessment of organisation capabilities and readiness. Sometimes some staff will stay, some staff will go, some staff will reskill. But This is a significant undertaking, and to not be aware of the skills you need for the tomorrow and whether you have them in your organisation and how do you build them can be the biggest mismatch, because the organisational title change and a job role description a little bit tweaked, you'll find challenges, in months, if not in a year. Engage employees, so critical to tell you what you may not know. Check your own and your leader's commitment. Like I said, I started with around organisation. If you say innovation is important, but your behaviour doesn't demonstrate that, then the organisation and culture won't change. Communicate, 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 communicate. So I get big ideas and my team, and I get them all excited, I hope, and then I'm out the gate. And I'm forgetting to say, hey, this is probably my biggest weakness, is communicating. And there's an enormous discipline around sharing, collaborating, and bringing people back together. Innovation is not a place of lone wolves. It's a place of teams and communities. And equip employees with tools. There are so many tools to help innovation, mindsets, design thinking, inclusive design, even just the platform to allow people to collaborate, to find knowledge is really important. And that's my presentation. Thank you.